views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters and editors and writers and videographers and filmmakers, anybody who puts stuff out in the Bronx. In our second section today, we're going to talk to one of my friends and colleagues who has a not-for-profit. He's a talk show host on BronxNet television, and he's got something really special that he does in our neighborhoods, and we're going to talk to him about that. But we're going to start off with a reporter over there at The City, and it is Katie Honan, who has not been with us before, but I'm thrilled to say good evening. Nice to have you with us, Katie.
Thanks for having me on.
I'm going to tell you in public what I told you prior to the show. I thought that your reporting on the city's, for want of a better term, fudging the numbers or putting out numbers that weren't perfectly accurate on time when it comes to COVID infections. I thought that was landmark reporting on your part. We know that Governor Cuomo was accused of something similar with senior citizen centers. And, so I just thought you did a great job with that. You did couch it a little bit off camera. So let's talk a little bit about what actually happened. Now, this was at the beginning of December. And so we'll rewind the clock a little bit. What happened with the reporting of the city's numbers and the mayor?
Yeah, I can even rewind it back further. So to the peak of COVID, not that we want to remember exactly that, but in March and April, as reporters, and I really went after the mayor for this, just getting as much data as possible. And I would ask, why don't we have this information? You need to have it broken down, whether it's by borough, by zip code, cases, and then deaths. We knew the deaths were happening and we didn't know where. So then the zip code map of deaths was released in mid-May. And, it seemed like a long time, and other municipalities had released it earlier. And earlier this fall, someone, a source thankfully reached out to me and gave me internal emails that would not have been available to me as a reporter, even under the state's Freedom of Information Act law, because it was in between people from the city's health department, but leaked to me emails and other documents that showed that this information, particularly on the deaths and where people were dying, was available in April, the first week of April. And for whatever reason, City Hall just delayed.
They delayed it. Now, did they ultimately release, I hate to even ask, truthful numbers? Or did you feel like it was, kind of deliberately held back for one reason or another?
No, the numbers they released, from what I can tell, were truthful. It was just the time that lapsed. And it was concerning to people within the health department because they felt like, look, if you knew where the deaths were occurring, it might make you realize how dangerous this was. And there was other messaging, for example, people within the health department who usually had been front facing to smaller doctors and community health centers were no longer allowed to speak to them. So when it came to really vital messaging to the public about what was going on, everything was filtered through City Hall. Whether you want to attribute that to Mayor Bill de Blasio's micromanagement, and we all were aware there was lots of reporting of how he moved responsibilities from the health department to the city's Health and Hospitals Corporation. It was just a lot of internal strife between the agencies at a time when the city was in a very, very crucial moment, truly life or death. What was going, and we weren't getting the information.
There's one piece that you did not mention. I mean, you said we want to know where the deaths are. Now this goes back to the fundamental CompStat theory that goes back to, of course, the Giuliani days. The reason that we want to know where the deaths are is because that's where resources need to be put immediately. And one of the things you identified quite correctly is we know what happened to our most vulnerable communities, in April of 2020. And if a spike was going to be, especially in some of those neighborhoods, that's where we want. And we don't want it 2 weeks late because, you could, if there's a problem there with either resource or access or vaccinations or whatever it is. I'm not a health professional to know what you need to do exactly in those spaces. That's why you need it. That's why even the delay, if the information was there, make it public. And also it would let people in the neighborhood know. People in Mott Haven, for example, would say, wait a minute, we've got a spike here. Immediately, those local officials, the community board, residents could stay safe. So to me, I really appreciated your reporting. That's
No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the people reaching out to me, because we as reporters can only get, I always imagine it's like an iceberg, we see just this much and we could try, but we rely on people on the inside, city workers who have this information. So that's why I always try to encourage dialogue with the people, while also letting them know I'm not going to gen you up, confidentiality and that kind of thing. But
of course.
Yeah, it really is like a trust you're trying to build with the people who have this information, because that was a time, it was every single day was so stressful trying to figure out what was going on.
Right.
Know that the city had it and just sat on it. Really,
I'll put it in a colloquial Bronx phrase. Tell it. If you got it, tell it. Let somebody know.
I think
listen, I want to know, and I'm going to, reporter to reporter, ask you, were you picking a little bit at the mayor by saying, well, the mayor closed 20 COVID testing centers, and then a couple of days later he was like, hey, wait a minute, ladies and gentlemen, we need more testing out there. Was it like that, or was it really like, well, he flip-flopped in a way? Seemed to me the timing was such that he didn't fully know that he was going to need more testing at the time that he closed those.
No, 20. Yeah, and my colleagues at the city wrote that they used data that they had kept on hand to see previous sites to figure out exactly how many were closed. But that just came from noticing an uptick. And I think, the mayor closed those, and other health officials, they closed them when there wasn't a demand. But perhaps someone in the greatest city in the world should have noticed an uptick.
Right. Should have been watching, CNN to see the president warning about Omicron at the time. Yeah. And then, of course, assuming now, I mean, this goes back to something way back when. I remember that the original numbers in the Bronx for COVID infections, and we're talking about, late March 2020, showed the Bronx to kind of be doing better. And I said, nah, I know where it's going to hit, and I know where we don't have the resources. And of course, it was only a matter of time before those numbers flipped around. So maybe it's the same kind of thing. And now there's a tremendous crush about testing. I have somebody close to me who was not feeling well and waited online in Co-op City for like 2.5 hours, maybe more, yesterday. And then there were people who waited later and then were told that we don't have any tests left, or we're closing and goodbye. This is like a problem. Where are we at for testing right now? And there's your long COVID test lines by Katie Honan.
Yeah, and that was, I think now this week it's getting a little bit better. There's more actual tests and there's more testing sites open. But yeah, I mean, what we saw in the previous 2 weeks, it was just a crush of people, whether they needed, you had Omicron surging, so people were trying to figure out what was going on. You had people who needed to travel, so they needed to get tests. So it was, everywhere I went, it was really, really long lines. There's a site opened by me at the Woodside houses in Queens. The line has been wrapped around the building for 2 weeks now. And also that's because there's fewer testing sites than there had been, a month ago. So it's this combination of things. I have noticed those rapids that you get at Duane Reade that had been sold out last week. I saw a bunch at my Duane Reade yesterday. The city was doing giveaways. But yeah, they're just going through lots and lots of tests. I went to a site in Corona last week, and the people couldn't open the boxes quick enough to give out the tests to people waiting.
Yeah, I'm thinking that it in the perfect world, we'd like to have a van on every street corner, and then we could get there. Do you have, I don't know if you know this, do you have and I don't know the answer to it, do you have the sense that these are city resources providing these testing centers, or there is some support coming from the federal government on these things, or the state even? But I think the president has been talking a lot about funding these things.
It's a combination. From what I've seen, it's primarily city-run sites. But I know in Jackson Heights, Queens, there was a CDC bus. So that was from the federal government. The state was providing tests, and the at-home rapids, and the federal government. But yeah, most of the sites, if you're looking for a site, if it's a publicly run site, so it's not one of these private PCR tests that can cost, $300 for
Right.
in a couple hours. It is run by the city with support from the state. But yeah, there's like I saw there's like a little CDC van at Travers Park in Jackson Heights, Queens, and I'm sure if you
Yeah, we need 30 of those.
right, exactly.
Right. I mean, let's start there. 30 of those in a part of Queens. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
numbers of people, who could potentially be affected. Almost out of time. I want to talk one last thing about mandates and closing, and a recent thing that came out. I thought it was very surprising. I believe it was the CDC said that health employees don't have to quarantine for whatever the number was, 10
10,
days,
yeah.
7 days. And yet now you wrote a story about city employees calling for remote work options as the virus spreads. Where are we at? And nobody wants to close down again.
Right.
But sympathy for the workers, and of course, a worker says, "Look, I'm ready to keep working. We did it a year ago, a year and a half ago. I don't want to ride the subway, at least right now." So, what do you think? Where are we at as far as all that that whole
Yeah.
thing goes?
I think, and as it pertains to city workers, and it's from most of the city workers I speak to who are office workers. I don't mean teachers or police officers or firefighters they can't do their jobs remotely. I mean, teachers can, we've seen that, but a lot of office workers within city agencies, they adapted and they worked remotely in 2020. And in a lot of ways, they said they were much more productive, maybe because they had to be because of the emergency situation we were in, but there's no telework option. And I think what concerns them is there's no flexibility at all. And
But I have to interject. There was a year and a half ago, right? I mean, nobody
yeah,
could come to work, and the city didn't shut down. I'm not saying that every worker, was working remotely, but I guess they're scared of having it affect a trickle down, as it were,
right.
the lunch shops and the
Yeah.
people around City Hall, and of course the buses and subways. You take those people off the trains, all of a sudden, it affects other things.
Yeah, and that's what the mayor says, and he says in a way that insults many people. He says, "Oh, you just get more work done in person," which kind of belittles the work they did
Oh,
remotely.
goodness,
Yeah,
goodness,
what they
goodness.
say is we want the option, and they
We
feel that they're like lab rats, or they're just working to businesses open in Lower Manhattan where
I have to interrupt because we're running out of time, but we started this conversation with the mayor, but we have just seen in that conversation both the good and the bad of Bill de Blasio is that, well, we get it, but he said the wrong thing there as far as I can tell anyway.
we're all complex people, even the mayor, I guess, in figuring that out.
Katie Honan, what a pleasure to have you on the program. Do you anticipate you're going to keep working on Omicron and COVID, or the world is your oyster, so to speak?
Yeah, I think COVID is a story that isn't going anywhere, even if hopefully our numbers go
Right.
down, and just the long-term effects on the city. It's a story that stayed with me, and I know it's stayed with our readers as well. So I will hope to keep reporting on it.
We hope you will. Katie Honan from the city, thank you so much. And we're going to take a short break. And when we come back from that break, as I said, one of my colleagues is going to be on the show. You think we can't talk? We can talk. Don't go away. We'll be right back with the Bronx Buzz right after this.